breaking out in any whale talk here during this message. I was asked before the service, did I go see a doctor this week? And I said, no, I think I'm okay. The whale talk is not any account that I've lost my mind or anything. We're thankful for God, that God is always good. Let us pray. Oh, friend, may the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you. You're our strength. You're the one who provides us with comfort, and we give thanks to you for this. Amen. How many of you were familiar with that game that the kids and I played called telephone? Most of us are, yeah. It used to be one of those games where you started off with some sort of phrase like, my grandma lives on Easy Street. And by the time it gets to the end of all those who are participating, you find out that grandma has very big feet. You see, we've grown up in different ways of trying to convey a message. Maybe you grew up with the 2 tin cans with a string in the middle of it there, and you're trying to understand what the message is as it's being sent, and trying to convey that back and forth. We've lived with walkie-talkies. Channel 14, remember that on the walkie-talkie? And then now as a generation, we're more accustomed to Verizon's ads that ask us, can you hear me now? You see, we've grown up with many different things, and even to this day, but the same intention is always true in all of these cases. A message sent may not always be a message received. Consider this. There's a couple that were planning to travel to Florida for a little bit of vacation. They were from Chicago. It was during the snowy season, and the husband decided to go ahead and head down to Florida and make sure that the hotel room was established and everything was fine, so he checked in. Well, before he left, his wife, who too also had a business trip, they exchanged a new email address that she had, and he took it down, and he thought he had it, and he decided to send her a message. Well, it was the wrong email address. It went to another woman. In this case, it was a very elderly widow of a man who was very active in the life of the church. And she went to her email shortly after the funeral there while her children were still in the house. The last thing they heard was her screaming and hitting the floor in a dead faint. Well, they ran into her little study, and sure enough, there was a message right there on the screen from somebody's husband. But the words went like this: "Dearest wife, just got checked in. Everything is prepared for your arrival tomorrow." P.S. P.S. Sure is hot down here. I did get hit in the head this week, didn't I? God help us all. The message sent isn't always the message received. I'm reminded of my older son when he was in school. He had a book report to do, and he came to me and he said, "Dad, I've got this book I have to read." And the conversation got a little twisted, and I said, "Oh, son, you have a book report to do, and it's due when?" And he says, well, Dad, I have this book to read, and it's due when I'm done with it." And it just never made quite much sense there. He had this gift of being able to read the directions on his syllabus, and he would only read the words that he wanted to read. Sound familiar? How many of you sit in church and you only hear the words that you want to hear? Sometimes we only hear or read what we want to hear in the first place. That message sent isn't always the message that is received. This morning's reading from the Gospel of Matthew shows this account of Jesus talking before a group of people. It's one of those more memorable passages that we read about Jesus in the New Testament. It's known as the Sermon on the Mount, and it is kicked off with these series of phrases that we often call the beatitudes. And I imagine people sat and they heard Jesus speak, but in reality, as they gathered, there were probably those who were even further off that didn't quite hear entirely what Jesus was saying. Imagine the disciples were fine. They were always up there kind of in the front huddle and could hear most of everything that Jesus had to say, although they did ask him some questions afterwards, it seemed. But I can imagine that whole moment, that Jesus is up on this hill and he's trying to project his voice as loud as he can. People are off in various places and huddles there, and they're trying to listen to what Jesus has to say, and before you know it, the message becomes a little bit different than what Jesus was trying to convey in the first place. Well, believe it or not, every once in a while, history does help us to interpret what Jesus might have said or could have said. And we recently came upon this piece of fine architecture, not architectural, but more, what's that fancy word I look when you dig up stuff? You know what it is. What is it? Archaeology. We found a fine piece of archaeology, a videotape from back when Jesus was doing his thing. And we actually happened to have found a clip from the Sermon on the Mount. We'd like to share that with you today. As we try to figure out this message sent isn't always the message that's received. Sometimes the message sent isn't always the message received, and I'm afraid this is oftentimes how we hear messages about Jesus, or God forbid, from the nut that stands up in front of you. Maybe we just want to hear what we want to hear in the midst of those distorted and incomplete phrases. It's like asking at the end of the service, just exactly what was he trying to say to us? What did he want us to hear? At some point, we wonder why we should be maybe listening in the first place, and maybe we should go off to a stoning or a potluck or something else to occupy our time. But in this case, these beatitudes, these statements that preface Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, really reveal a kind of picture how life really is. Jesus himself was often praised for many things that he did, the miracles that he accomplished. He turned water into wine. He healed the sick. He made the lame walk, and then they turn around and they beat the crud out of him and they crucify him. Did someone miss his message? All humanity has shared in that similar pain for some couple thousands of years. Repentant hearts have identified with the cross. However, we know, or at least we put together what we think is the whole story. We understand the glory of the empty tomb and the victory of eternal life. But it's as if these beatitudes are reminders. They're pictures of the ups and the downs in life. That is perhaps the message we are called to receive. And see, Matthew's perspective on life, these ups and downs, really are not some sense of practical advice for successful living. You know, if you're meek, you're going to inherit the earth. Well, great, I guess I'll go be meek. It's not some sort of advice of how to have a prosperous life, but it's really a declaration. Matthew is providing these words of declaration, of conviction, of something that is coming and present, but something that's already, or at least is coming in the future. It's this whole notion how the Beatitudes are an expression of a present reality, but also of a future intention. The Beatitudes themselves seem to consist of two verbs, are and will. Blessed are the blank, for they will. Yada, yada, yada. Each beatitude begins with that sense of being in the present tense, blessed are, and moves to the future tense, for they will. It indicates an expression of what is already true about the Christian community. A message sent is already a message that further becomes. Now, probably unfortunately, not every person in a community or a congregation can claim to be meek or pure of heart or merciful, but these Beatitudes address for us what the community as a whole can experience. Among every Christian congregation are found those people who are meek, who are ministers of mercy and workers of peace. Their presence is an activity that is among us in the presence, but also is an example of the future kingdom of God that is to come. Their presence reminds us of how we are to be a part of more of living out the values of God's kingdom. Now, to move from this future into this future tense indicates this life of a kingdom that is waiting for us. Something that's to be validated until God is finished with the current creation that's in place. You see, the future tense of the Beatitudes, the will, may resist all notions that Christianity is some philosophy of life, one that's designed to make people successful and calm today in this present moment. You can almost hear me waiting to say, it's almost like Nietzsche saying, or actually Karl Marx, excuse me, how religion is the opium of the people. As Matthew claims, all of these Beatitudes, blessed are, for it is now that leads into all that is to come. You see, Christianity is not some scheme. It's not some scheme to reduce stress or to lose weight. I think it's the opposite way at times. Nor is Christianity some scheme to advance someone's career or to preserve one from illness. Christian faith, instead, is a way of living based on the sure hope that meekness is the way of God. That righteousness and peace will finally prevail, that God's future will be a time of mercy, not cruelty. So blessed are those who live this life now, even when such a life seems foolish, for they will, in the end, be blessed by God. So what message do we intend to send that we want people to hear? What word of hope is there for us to grasp a hold of and to take home today? Well, the easy thing is to say, blessed are those who are blessed. That's pretty obvious. But here's the good news. The good news is for some of us it may mean getting a little closer to hear the words of Jesus, to sense the expression of God through God's Spirit, for the one who takes the best of us cheesemakers and Greeks alike so that we become more so beloved children of a living God. You see, the message sent is not always the message that is received. A message can easily be misinterpreted. There's the pastor that met before a bunch of people who were in prison, and he looked out in front of them and he says, "It's so nice to see so many of you here." Sometimes the interpretation of a message isn't always what is to be conveyed. But sometimes the message received might be a better message. And I suspect, though, that the greater message comes when both the sender and the receiver come together in that place and they respond to each other in such a way that the message of hope allows for both of them to experience the attitude of God's grace. For this, then, blessed are and blessed will be the children of God. For in all these things we give thanks, because truly we are blessed, and blessed are those who are to come. Amen. I invite you